so much for taking the time today to join us for another JumpCloud Partner interview. Let's kick things off in the traditional way. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your MSP?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. So I'm Steve Doty. I am the CEO and founder of an MSP called Defensible Technology, and we are a cybersecurity and risk management focused MSP out of New York City. Just a little bit of background, I guess. In about late 2019, I was working at the Juilliard School in New York as their CTO and their CISO, and had been there for a few years, helping the school kind of modernize its technology and establish a formal cybersecurity program. But I had spent most of my career in consulting, starting as a network engineer in the mid 90s at a VAR, followed by 7 or 8 years at a Big Four consulting firm, and then almost a decade at a digital forensics and incident response consultancy. So kind of had the entrepreneurial spirit, and just before COVID hit, actually, in the beginning of 2020, sort of not planning for a global pandemic, I started Defensible Technology. I was fortunate to have a few kind of anchor clients to get going, and really started the business as a one person shop, offering virtual CISO services under a concept that our sort of work is rooted in making actionable recommendations, like for particular controls and services, solutions, policies. And ultimately, if we're asking the customer to spend money, that our approach needs to be defensible. We've developed sort of a risk-based methodology for delivering on that. Sort of fast forward from 2020 to today, the business has expanded, and sort of as a natural sort of offshoot from offering virtual CISO services, we've expanded into managed service offerings and have partnered with JumpCloud and a number of other key solutions to help drive those managed services.
Yeah, terrific introduction there, actually. And I think I've spoken to a lot of MSPs around the world, and I think that yours is, I'm not saying unique, but it's quite an unusual story, I guess, that it came very much from the sort of security side, with then the managed services part being added on rather than the other way around, which is more common.
Yeah, we're sort of coming at the market from the opposite direction, I guess, where a lot of MSPs are traditionally IT focused, and now layering in virtual CISO and security services, and we're sort of coming from the security side and touching into the IT world. But we really find ourselves from a client perspective in one of two scenarios. One where we provide the security advisory and risk assessment type services and partner with an MSP for the IT operational side of things. So we have a number of relationships in that category, and then we do have customers where we bring sort of a full stack, and really JumpCloud sort of bridges that sort of line between security and IT operations for us. So it's been great.
Cool. Well, we'll drill into that as we go along. But you mentioned some of your typical sort of clients there. Do you have a particular client in mind? I mean, do you work in a particular vertical, or are you horizontal in nature, or what does a typical defensible tech client look like?
Yeah, it's a little bit all over the map. So we're not industry or vertical specific. We pretty much have clients in most verticals. We do have concentration in a little bit in higher ed, some nonprofits, and some healthcare, and software as a service businesses tend to be a good niche for us as well. But it's a little bit all over the place, from small customers up to a couple of thousand employees, on the larger side.
Yeah, and you mentioned you in some cases you work with other MSP to offer those services, but for the end user clients that you work with, have they generally got their own IT teams as well, or do you augment that, or do you replace that with your service?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mix. I mean, in most cases, we're operating in sort of a co-managed type environment where the customer has some form of an IT staff. It could be one person, it could be a full department, and we're sort of jointly managing solutions with them.
Okay, that's interesting. So coming at this the way that you have done then, a lot of MSPs, or so traditional MSPs, I guess, would offer some kind of productivity suite or offering or directory service. I mean, and I guess the main options there are probably Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace. I mean, do you offer those services? And if so, which side of the fence do you skew?
Yeah, so I mean, our customers are, again, a mix, both Office 365 and Google Workspace. We, from a JumpCloud perspective, part of the reasoning that we partnered with JumpCloud is for our Google Workspace customers, where there were needs for single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and kind of centralized user and device management and those sorts of things. And the Google Workspace customers, at least in our experience, don't have an Active Directory in most cases. So, JumpCloud's sort of the Swiss Army knife, if you will, that sort of covers all things we would need to do from a user, device, directory, single sign-on, multi-factor, password manager kind of perspective.
Yeah, well, that's fab to hear, because that's what we set out to do. So I'm glad you said that, which then jumps us to the next question, really, which is, I mean, how did you initially hear about JumpCloud? If you had a problem in mind that you wanted to solve, where did we first come across your radar?
Yeah, so it was looking to solve a single sign-on multi-factor authentication for a Google Workspace customer, and I had over the years I had a lot of experience with Okta from a single sign-on Active Directory services perspective, and Okta wasn't really the right fit for for this customer, and there's capabilities that didn't exist in the platform. So we kind of explored the market a couple of years ago for this particular customer, and landed on JumpCloud as a perfect fit for for that customer.
Great. And that was so it's a particular client requirement that you sort of first went in on. And you mentioned some of the features that, well, you listed a whole bunch of them there that we use. I mean, do you try and sort of use most of the JumpCloud features, or do you sort of mix them, sort of pick individual items out?
Yeah, it's been a little bit of both. I mean, our goal is to have the customer on all features, but we have had circumstances where, for example, we had a customer that back when LastPass was had their data breach issues, and they were looking for a different password manager. So our first entry point to that particular customer was to move them off LastPass into JumpCloud's password manager, and then sort of expand the other services and capabilities from there. But so our goal is to get the customer on all features, but that's not always a fit. Sometimes it's just single sign-on MFA in the password manager, and they're using other platforms for device and user management. But I would say as we sort of head further into 2024, one of the go-to-market use cases that we're going to look to bring to existing customers and new customers is sort of a consolidation strategy, right? Where we have a number of customers that are using a different platform for pushing out patches, for software distribution, a different platform for managing Mac, another platform for remote desktop support, right? So the ability to kind of consolidate those platforms into a single solution is something that we're gonna push into our customer base and to new customers in the market as well throughout the year.
Yeah, and that kind of backs up our research as well. One of the things that we're kind of looking to do, and our partners are telling us, is around this tool sprawl, I guess, as they're calling it, or consolidation of tools, to try and reduce the amount of individual solutions they've got for doing things.
Yep.
So hopefully we can help with that.
Yep.
And obviously, I think you mentioned some of them already, but when it comes to the clients and the sort of pain points of the clients, I think you mentioned sort of single sign-on MFA. I guess for security, you're advising clients that they need to do this. But how do you kind of insert JumpCloud into there to allow them to get their job done, but by putting in as little friction as possible to let them get on with their roles?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly most of the work happens on the back end. Obviously, single sign-on and MFA are sort of customer facing, but the other features are mostly invisible to the user as far as applying policies and those sorts of things to devices. So we've built it into their operation. And one of the other interesting things is, since we're a little bit, as you mentioned, a little bit of a different MSP in that we're sort of coming from the security perspective and approaching the IT operational line. We took a look at the marketplace and sort of asked ourselves the question: do we need sort of a traditional RMM type tool? Right? There's ConnectWise and Kaseya and other tools out in the industry, and we landed in working with JumpCloud and sort of pushing the feature set into customers that we really don't need an RMM, because we're sort of a new MSP from that perspective, and JumpCloud gives us just about everything that we need from a user and device management perspective.
Yeah, I think my experience with RMMs is they're obviously sort of super cool, super powerful, but they're very much from a device perspective, whereas I think JumpCloud obviously does device management, but
Yep.
in security, I think identity management is probably as important as device management now. And a lot of traditional RMMs are still focus on the device rather than the user or the user's identity.
Yep. Yep. And
So
part of
hopefully that's
our,
the moving. Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, so I'm thinking hopefully, as time goes on, identity becomes a little bit more important than the physical tin that people are using to access the services.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, identity, we often approach, sort of these table stake kind of controls with our customers, identity management being, one of the top ones, right? Endpoint protection and a number of other sort of, must have kind of controls. And identity is obviously a big piece of that.
Yeah. I often ask a question to when in this interviews, which is around the awareness in the marketplace, as in when you're kind of recruiting for business or speaking to prospects, whether is how aware the general SMEs are around security. I guess in your case, it may be slightly different because they're having a conversation with you, presumably because they're already have got those concerns or awarenesses around security and want help delivering that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly our sort of better customers are in tune to the security requirements and understand that there's going to be some increased spend and investment required to sort of elevate the game to where it needs to be. In other cases, we do have to make the case, and I think that's where our sort of our methodology comes into play, where we will typically start with a light risk assessment for a customer and catalog catalog the risks in a risk register, and then use those risks to justify a set of projects and the associated spend with those projects to then be delivered over a quarter by quarter kind of roadmap. And we use that approach to help justify increasing budgets and convincing the customer that there's sort of a minimum baseline here that if they really want to protect themselves, no matter really how small the business is, but where they need to be to really function and not face an existential threat for a small business. I mean, a ransomware attack, for example, could really be an existential threat for a smaller customer, right?
Yeah, and you mentioned baseline there. So I guess a question around the baseline or around standards in general. Are you seeing this, or do you think that this is going to continue to develop from a regulatory point of view, or maybe for cyber insurance point of view? Or is it just good practice? But what's going to be the driver to get SMEs to sort of up their security game?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, so absolutely, cyber insurance, I think, is over the past couple of years is becoming a bigger driver. I've seen the insurance companies, not just in the small business space, but enterprise wide as well, where the insurance companies have become much more savvy in terms of the questions they're asking, the types of information that they're requesting and requiring as part of pricing out premiums. So I think that's absolutely been a big driver and will continue to be a big driver. On the regulatory side of things, I think there's always a ton of frameworks depending on which industry you're in that business can sort of adhere to. Today, we actually have the NIST cybersecurity framework version 2.0 is being released today, and I think that framework provides a pretty solid foundation to build a security program from. It covers all the things that we've talked about: identity management, device protection, and those sorts of things. And I think that's the next revision of NIST, the NIST CSF, is going to help be very helpful to small businesses to have a baseline to measure themselves against.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'll check out that framework actually. I wasn't aware it was coming out today, so that does seems really interesting. And I think if nothing else, it starts to sort of raise awareness. And I think my word that what sort of I've been picking up on the street is that cyber insurance is kind of the main driver, but people want to get insured and they don't want to sort of have these sort of huge bills or say potentially go out of business and things. So that's a definite driver. So hopefully we'll see that continue.
Yep. One of the other things from an insurance perspective, that in terms of if you have a small or medium sized enterprise that is has accumulated technology debt and really has not kept up with upgrading systems, moving to the cloud, and using things like single sign-on and those sorts of platforms. It's now's the time to do it as well, prior to even engaging with cyber insurance, because if you do have an issue and need to enter a cyber insurance claim, one of the challenges in terms of getting reimbursed for the spend is similar to like if it's a car insurance. If you totaled a 2005 Honda Accord, the insurance company is only going to reimburse you for the value of a 2005 Honda Accord, right? So by upgrading or eliminating some of that technology debt in coordination with engaging an insurance um, provider, you're sort of bringing the overall sort of tech stack up to a level that um, just will be beneficial by not sort of ending up in that kind of situation where you had an issue on some old technology, and the insurance that you thought you had is not actually going to help you recover and restore from a significant issue.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. I like the way that we put that. And I guess that touches upon what I was going to mention next is obviously you've been really successful since 2020. I've been looking at your website and everything, and the way that you position the offerings really, really nice and neat. But when you're speaking to a prospect, well, I guess take it a step back, is how are you finding new prospects? Is that word of mouth or is that marketing? And then when you are speaking to them, how do you kind of get across what you've just said to me and the importance of that, but without kind of try and sound like you're just trying to sell on fear, like, sometimes worst case scenario, if you don't do this, the building's going to blow up kind of thing. How do you just make that happen?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things I like to do is compare things to sort of the healthcare and medical field, right? And it really, from a risk management perspective, the two kind of align, right? So if you have behaviors like you smoke, you don't eat healthy, you don't eat well, then you're at a risk. You're much higher risk for diabetes or cancer or those sorts of things. There's no guarantee. It doesn't mean that you're going to get those sorts of diseases, but you have much higher likelihood. Same kind of thing applies from a technology and cybersecurity perspective. If you have practices like I don't know, no multi-factor authentication because there's user inconvenience associated with it, and those sorts of things. If you have those kinds of practices, again, doesn't mean that you're going to have a cybersecurity issue, but you are at a higher likelihood of having something of a significant impact. And we sort of try to position the conversations in that light with prospects and customers.
Yeah, that's really good actually, quite thought provoking. And just on that subject, just while I slightly darting around the subjects here slightly, but when you mention those conversations with your clients, are they generally sort of company corporate owned devices, or do you have a sort of spattering of bring your own device as well, which brings more challenges to yourself?
Yeah, no, it's a mix. I mean, um, obviously from a pure security perspective, it's great if a if a customer can issue their corporate devices, laptops and phones, and have complete control, but that's just not realistic in today's world. And many of our customers are hybrid sort of hybrid office and remote workforce type environment. We do have a number of customers that are fully remote, right? So there tends to be a wide range of sort of bring your own devices, and having the ability to apply some level of control over those devices is critical to a good cyber hygiene.
Yeah. And what sort of mix of environments do you have? Are you mainly Windows or Mac, and then on the mobile side, are you Android or iOS, or is it just a big combination of everything?
Yeah, it's a mix. It's a mix of Windows, Mac, probably mostly iPhones, although some level of Android. But yeah, it's a mix, and I think I didn't answer in terms of the marketing side of things as far as how we uh, go after customers, and it's largely been word of mouth up until the past year or so, and now we've over the past year invested in sales and marketing kind of function to sort of extend beyond my existing network and some of the other key founders and their sort of contacts.
And how's that gone? Because I know that from conversations over the years with many MSPs, that first sales hire is probably one of the most sort of critical roles that you can recruit for, and it can be quite difficult to find that right sales skill into an MSP.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, so far so good, and we're sort of again interesting from the MSP side of things in that we play very well with other MSPs, and we're very content in terms of being the virtual CISO and helping our MSP partners sell their security stack to fulfill the recommendations that we're making. And then in cases where there's not an existing MSP, we do obviously have a tool stack that we bring to the table as well.
Yeah, which leads me very nicely on to the final question, which is if I was to be at a sort of trade show or an event, and I saw you there, and I was chatting with a prospect MSP, and I said, have a word with Stephen, and he'll tell you why you should take a look at JumpCloud. What sort of things would you say to him or her?
So I would say, it back to sort of my Swiss Army knife sort of um, analysis. There's an entire full feature set in my mind in terms of um, being able to manage the identities, do user and device provisioning and deprovisioning, and sort of meet the security requirements for how you manage an asset and how you manage an identity. And that's a great sort of starting point for any security program. And then from there, there's a number of other capabilities that you can bring into the fold. Really, every organization should be using some form of a password manager, right? So I love the password manager feature, and sort of layering that in. The ability to push out device policies and align to, like, we utilize the CIS standards, for example, and you can configure the device policies against that standard and push it out to all of your devices. So again, it's really sort of a JumpCloud platform gives you everything that you need, in my mind, to manage an IT function from a user identity, device, and application perspective.
Well, I couldn't have said that any better myself. And if I did say it, they probably wouldn't believe me. So I guess it's better to come from an existing client like yourself. So yeah, but that's kind of what we're aiming for. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, it's great. It's like I said, it's a key part of our tech stack, and we look forward to growing the solution with our existing and new customers.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, Stephen. I really appreciate it. And thanks for being a valued JumpCloud partner.